Well, welcome once again. This is Monday Night Sports, and I'm Dupe, your host, Rick DuPree, and I've been promising you this for a while, so we are going to deliver tonight, finally, and kind of give a recap. Well, not so much a recap, but more of looking forward, looking ahead to see what's in store for the Seahawks from the expert, or an expert, I should say. But what's in store for the Seahawks, not only for next season, but more importantly, this offseason, what's going to happen, setting them up to be back into, the position of being one of the teams that are, in the playoffs and vying for a Super Bowl. With that said, man, some great games yesterday. My goodness. The Rams and Bucks, man, the Chiefs and Bills. I'm gonna tell you what, I have become a big fan of Josh Allen. Man, that cat can play. Okay, what is it? I think this is 6'4", 6'5", 240 or whatever. He used his legs yesterday. This can be argued any way you want to argue it, but you look at the overtime. I do not like the overtime system that the NFL has. And I get it. The defense, the Bills defense needed to stop the Chiefs, and they couldn't. And the Chiefs took it in. But I say give them whatever it is, 5, 10, 12, another quarter, whatever it is, and you play. And then at the end of that, if it's a tie, it's a tie. Now, obviously, in the playoffs, you got to keep playing until you get a winner. But it is what it is. Anyway, with that said, I want to bring on to the show from the Seattle Times, Bob Condotta, and we've been talking about getting Bob on, and finally happy to have him. He'll join us today, and really just talking about what's going on this offseason and what do the Seahawks really need to do. So let's bring Bob on, and we'll chat a little bit. And there he is, the man himself. How you doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And it's interesting. I mean, first of all, just talking about the playoffs, and man, I don't know if I can recall a weekend, a day like yesterday with two, just evenly matched games, exciting finishes. I mean, I don't know. What about you? I mean, I just, I was impressed.
Oh yeah, it was phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, to have 4 games come down like that, to have 3 decided on the last. They were all decided on the last play, but 3 field goals in the last play of regulation, and the other going to overtime. And having some upsets and just some amazing performances, and just the storylines too. I mean, that might have been the last game as a Green Bay Packer for Aaron Rodgers, and maybe the last game period for Tom Brady, and to have them happen, on their home fields and games everybody expected them to win. You couldn't have asked for more drama, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's no doubt. What about, I want to get your take real quickly, then I want to turn our focus for the remainder of the show on the Seahawks and what's going on with them. But what's your take on overtime? And it's interesting. I was watching ESPN earlier. I think it was I'm forgetting Ryan's last name, but anyway, he was talking about the playoffs. Said, if it had been different from the start, okay, that's one thing, but this is how it's always been. It's like, you get in the playoffs or rather into overtime, and it's whoever gets it done gets it done. I'm more of a proponent of having a set amount of time, or whatever the case may be. I mean, I hate the sudden death. And granted, the Bills played a great game. Josh Allen, man, he delivered and didn't get a chance in overtime. So just what's your take on the overtime, and what do you think? Will it remain that way? Any changes in store?
Well, I mean, this has come up a few different times through the last few years, and it's funny because it was Kansas City that brought up a rule change before the league a couple years ago, after they had the situation that was just like this in the AFC title game against New England, when New England got the ball first, went down and scored, and Kansas City never got the ball again, and everybody was sort of like, oh, it was unfair that they didn't get it. So what I could see happening is that they make a change for the playoffs and have it be some way that maybe it's just a 10-minute quarter, or maybe just a way to, make it, maybe you do a thing sort of like college where you force them to go for 2. And what you could have done yesterday is Kansas City scores, and then you could have, say, okay, Buffalo gets a possession, but they either have to score a touchdown here, and if they score, they have to go for 2. something like that.
Yeah.
I do just feel like, that game was so fun yesterday. It felt you felt sort of cheated to not see Josh Allen get another shot at it, because, you saw him twice respond like that in the last 2 minutes. And then, just a flip of a coin means he doesn't get another shot at it. But for sure, I could see this come up. The NFL has seen more willing than ever the last 10 years or so to sort of make for a while anyway, really, but it seems like even just the last few years, more than willing to try to make some changes to kind of just improve the entertainment quotient of the game. So it will not surprise me if, when the league meetings come up in March, that this gets brought up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that would be great. I wasn't real familiar, say, a year or two ago with Josh Allen, and obviously he, but man, I didn't realize he was until this season. I mean, I started seeing more and more. Didn't realize he was such a good runner. I mean, that is a big dude, and he got some key first downs yesterday. And man, he's got an arm. He threw some strikes, so that was a fun game to watch. That was a real fun game to watch. Anyway, with that said, our guest is. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, Seahawks fans may remember that, there was a little bit of controversy because the Seahawks went and scouted his pro day when, you figured there was absolutely no way they'd have a chance to get him. But it sort of got leaked out there, and it was at a time when Russell had a contract situation and all that. And, why are they going to Wyoming's pro day to do this? And Wyoming had a couple other players they could have been looking at too. But everybody was really intrigued by him. I think the Seahawks might have been intrigued to see if there was a way, if he slipped further than he did. There were a lot of questions about his accuracy coming out. Everybody sort of knew he was a really good athlete, had the strong arm and stuff like that. But, this was a guy who his hometown school, Fresno State, didn't even think he was good enough to go there. And he sort of had to, take a long route around. And, his sort of tangible skills really intrigued everybody coming out of college. And he's really proven it these last couple of years.
Yeah, no doubt. Thanks. Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times, our guest. Let's turn our attention, Bob, for the remainder of the show to the Seahawks. Some moves, I don't know if they necessarily surprised anybody, but most notably, letting Ken Norton go. This defense, people have said over the last few years, well, they bend but don't break. But I mean, come on. So was that a surprise to you? And kind of what direction do you see them going as far as defensive coordinator?
No, it was not a surprise. The way the defense went and has kind of gone the last couple of years, Ken had been there for 4 years. I guess a little bit of surprise in that Ken Norton has been a guy that has been with Pete, I think, since 2004, other than the 3 years he was with the Raiders. So he's a guy that they've had a long relationship with going back to the time at USC. And then, everybody knows that defense is sort of Pete Carroll's thing, far more so than the offense. And if you look at his history of defensive coordinators, they've almost always been people that he has had a previous relationship with, or someone he's just promoted from within or whatever, because the thought is nobody's going to come in and completely reinvent what they do defensively, because that's Pete's side of the ball. That's his what he's done his entire career, and he made his name being a defensive coordinator, and there's never going to probably be a really significant change to what they do schematically. But after the last couple of years have been very un-Seahawk like for sure, and he might, be at a point where he's a little more willing to have an outside set of eyes, be like, hey, I don't want you to completely reinvent what you're doing, but it might be good to have somebody just from the outside come and look at the way we're doing things. And maybe just not the way they do things, but the way they teach things in practice and things like that. I think maybe there can be a danger that you just sort of keep doing the same thing over and over and over. And if you're not getting the same results, you just kind of have someone else come in. So for sure, it didn't shock me at all. I mean, if there was a side of the ball you thought they would make a change on, it was the defensive side. And, last year they did it with the offense after they'd set a franchise record in points, fired the offensive coordinator. So the NFL is a harsh business. So, it is interesting. A week later, we still don't really know what direction they're going. We've heard some names. I think there are a few obvious candidates out there, but exactly what they're going to do and who they're going to get, we still don't know that at this point.
Yeah. Bob, it was my contention on this show all season that this team had the talent, even defensively. There was a lot of talent there, and I looked at the scheme that they run, like you said, that's Pete's baby. That's his side of the ball. But man, they just seem like at key moments, they could not stop their opponent. And their opponent, opposing quarterbacks came in, and many of the quarterbacks this season had career games against the Seahawks. And so I was like, man, what is it? And they just didn't seem to be able to. Number one, you got to get pressure on the QB. You got to force him to do something and not just sit back in the pocket. If you give a guy that much time, he's going to pick you apart. But secondly, that they look like they just were in various types of zones more often than not, and guys found open spots, in contrast to having cover guys that are in your face, can jam you up at the line of scrimmage and then play off of that. So am I reading it wrong? I mean, is this team, do they just lack talent and they need to get some talent, or was it more scheme? Probably a combination of both, but I think more scheme than talent.
Yeah, I mean, the talent issue this year was in the secondary, and specifically the cornerback spot, and really getting that settled. And I think if there's something you can really sort of blame them on in terms of how they constructed the team, it's the cornerback spot. And, I think they really thought they could go with Trey Flowers and DJ Reed and Akilo Weatherspoon as sort of their top three corners. And, that was pretty, they drafted Trey Brown as well, who I think they had high hopes for. But, I think even at the time, people were sort of questioning, well, shouldn't you really make sure you have more of a sure thing at one of those cornerback spots if you really want to play a little bit more man defense and be a little more that way, especially because Jamal Adams is such a unique player. He's not really your traditional safety in a lot of ways. He's not a guy you probably want to put in a lot of man coverage situations. Exactly. So I think from the start, people felt like you need to be really strong at the other spots. So it really just took them a long time to figure out the cornerback spot. I mean, they end up just, they traded Akilo Weatherspoon. They cut Trey Flowers, who, basically were two of their top three corners throughout in the preseason. That was sort of a sign that I think they misread a little bit what they could do with those guys and how they could put that together. And then obviously, with some of the injury issues they had back there as well, Trey Brown looked like he was really coming on, and suddenly he gets hurt. And, you're going back to Sidney Jones and things like that. So I think that was the issue they had there. And then, up front, they struggled with the pass rush, and certainly you can argue did they let the pass rushers give them sort of enough freedom to rush the passer? Obviously there's a lot of talk and conversation about how often they were dropping some of those guys into coverage. I don't think they did it a whole lot, maybe quite as much as people think. They obviously just had a few times that really seemed to backfire on them that I think caught people's attention. But, certainly like the Carlos Dunlap thing was a little bit confounding, how he really did nothing for about the first half of the season, and then suddenly ends up, going just gangbusters the last 5 or 6 weeks. And Carlos himself just seemed to indicate that they weren't really just letting me rush the passer. So I think there were some things like that. I think part of that was because they wanted to play a little bit more of that big defensive line. Pete Carroll's thing is always going to be to stop the run first. And they did that really well this year. They only allowed 3.7 yards per rush. They were, I think, second in the NFL in fewest yards allowed per rush. And that's sort of what that's where it all starts with him. So I think he would feel like they did a lot of good things up front, but certainly they weren't just rushing the passer well enough. So, I think it was a little bit of everything. I think their talent was good enough to be better than it was. Their talent's not what it was 5 years ago. Richard Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and guys like that back there.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, like you said, what they do. I like Trey Brown, and like I said, unfortunately, injuries kept him out, majority of the season. But he showed some flashes. There was like, okay, this guy, I see why they drafted him. He can play. So it'd be interesting to see how he progresses, and what they do, in the offseason. Let's stay on the defensive side of the ball, real quickly. Got a guy like who is a perennial, Pro Bowler, guy who's gonna, I think, go in the Hall of Fame. Bobby Wagner. He's getting older, and he is dominant. And I think even him, if he goes down a level, he's still so good that he's going to be good. But you got some guys behind him that can play, and I like some of the young players that they have at linebacker. Kind of as you evaluate. Let's actually let me have you start with the D line. You mentioned Carlos Dunlap. What do you see them doing on the defensive line? Because again, it's great if you hold your opponent to under 4 yards a carry, but if you can't stop them from passing, you can't get pressure on a quarterback. It doesn't matter. Do you see them making any major moves there on the defensive line, and then go back to linebackers?
Yeah, for sure. I think they're okay with their defensive tackles. I think those guys played really well this year. They will need to re-sign Al Woods and sort of hope that they can get he'll be 35 next year. So it starts to get up there a little bit. But he played really well this year. I think if they can sign him with Puna Ford and Brian Monet, I think they feel like they got a really good tackle trio there. What they need is really go their just difference maker on the edge. Dunlap played really well at the end of the year. You can bring him back. He's still under contract. You got Darrell Taylor, obviously. Kerry Hyder's played pretty well. That big end, he didn't, get a lot done necessarily rushing the passer. Maybe reevaluate how you use him and see if maybe you can get some more sacks out of him the way he did in San Francisco a couple of years. And you probably have to spend a lot of money to re-sign Rasheem Green as well. But I think they still need to go get try to get another veteran guy out there. Take a flyer on somebody, see if there's someone you can 8 or 10 million or something like that, and to really try to increase it. I just think they are going to have to do something like that there. With the linebacker spot, obviously.
But quick question before you go to linebacker. Yeah. Do you see them using Jamal Adams? I after his first year, I was like, okay, this guy, on the edge, coming in, rushing, he was phenomenal. And like I said, this year, in addition to the injuries, they had him back in coverage more. And as you said, it certainly highlighted some of his deficiencies. Do you see them putting him in the position where he's rushing, blitzing, doing more on the line where he is so good at?
You're asking about Darrell Taylor? I'm sorry.
No. About Jamal Adams. Oh, Jamal Adams.
I'm sorry. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think they'll want to get back to using him more. He basically rushed the passer about half as often this year as he did last year. It's interesting. Early on, the numbers weren't that disparate, but he wasn't really getting there a lot. And Pete Carroll and Jamal acknowledged it as well that other teams were really kind of finding him and figuring out where he was and not giving him some of the free lanes that he had last year. And I think that combined with some of the other issues they had, made it so they wanted to be a little less aggressive with him. Because, if you're going to blitz Jamal, you really got to be confident that your corners can cover.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. And Bob's frozen here. The joys of virtual interviews and what have you, but we'll have him. We'll get this worked out in a minute. But yeah, I think Bob making a good point is that. There you are. Go ahead, Bob. Yeah, we're freezing a little bit, but go ahead. All right, we'll get that worked out in a minute. But I think he was making a good point, is that if you're going to use Jamal Adams in that capacity like you did year one and have him rushing more and more, you gotta be able to have cover guys there out at the corners. And that's something the Seahawks are going to have to do. When we get Bob back, we'll talk more about the linebacker situation. We talked a little bit about the defensive back. And then I want to get on the offensive side of the ball. You made the change. You bring in Shane Waldron and I think the obvious huge benefit for the Seahawks the last 5-6 weeks was Rashaad Penny and having that type of running game. I don't think anybody expected him to do what he did. Come on. But you saw glimpses, more than glimpses, I should say. You saw what the Seahawks saw in him when they drafted him, and he's healthy. And we've said this on the show, multiple times, is that here's a guy who has benefited immensely. Number one, being healthy, obviously, anyway, that's huge. But now he's at a point where being around guys like Chris Carson and more specifically Adrian Peterson for Rashaad Penny, that has helped him tremendously. And one of the things Adrian Peterson, we ran an interview a couple of weeks ago with Adrian Peterson, and he's talked about, of all the guys, Rashaad Penny's a guy who not only really took in everything that he shared, but he implemented it. And Adrian Peterson talked about most notably what Rashaad Penny was doing during the week to keep himself healthy, to get himself ready for the next week. And that's so important, taking care of your body, the way you eat, everything that you do, that all plays a role. And so that was a huge piece, I think in Rashaad Penny's success. And we'll be interested to see where we go. We're continuing to try to get Bob Condotta back on. And again, welcome to the virtual world and doing these virtually. If we can get him back on, we will. But I'll continue. So as we look at the defensive side of the ball, I think from the linebacker position, I mean, I like the young guys, that we saw. Jordan Brooks is, I'm a big fan of his, and I think that he will, he's a guy that the Seahawks, can look to. He's gonna, I think, be a strong force for the Seahawks for many years. And again, not writing Bobby Wagner off. I love Bobby Wagner, and I think even, again, just look at the age and the fact that he's getting older. And regardless of that, I think that he, even as I said a moment ago, if he even drops off a little bit, still he is so good that he's still going to be one of the best. And that's just the reality. But you look at Cody Barton and a guy who filled in well for him. Looks like we have Bob back. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. So I was just talking a little bit about what I'd like to do. We got about 6-7 minutes left. Real quickly, have you comment on the linebacker situation? Then let's go to the offensive side of the ball and kind of the obvious things happening there, and what you think overall the Seahawks have to do to get back up into being a perennial power. But linebacker position, you see many changes happening there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be a big one. I don't think Bobby Wagner will be back on the contract that he currently has. I'd be pretty surprised about that. So it's a $20 million cap hit for next year. Bobby made it sound like he's not necessarily wanting to renegotiate that, but
I don't blame him.
Yeah, but I think, but if they just, they can just cut him and he doesn't get any of it. So that's sort of what the decision's going to be. There is, what are they going to do? So, I think that'll be a lot of money for them, maybe for Bobby at the age that he is. And I think there's maybe some conflicting opinions on how good of a year he had this year. Obviously, I made the Pro Bowl and All Pro second team again, but internally it would be interesting to know exactly what they thought, because I think some of the issues with the zone and the pass coverage and stuff like that was, some issues that the linebacking crew had at times. And we'll see what decision they make there. And then the strong side linebacking spot will be, that's one thing I think with the new coordinator, maybe they'll really reevaluate how they did that this year. And, maybe they try to get a more dedicated, just a traditional strong side linebacker spot. They basically were using, they kind of started the year with the idea that it was going to be Darrell Taylor. And then I think they realized that Darrell Taylor was going to be best suited to just really rush the passer and get him rushing the passer as often as they could. And they had Benson Mayowa sort of play strong side, so you're base down strong side linebacker a lot more. But I don't know if they'll bring him, if they'll think that's a good idea to do that again or not. I think that to me, that would be the most interesting thing to see, that a new defensive coordinator might evaluate. So I think there definitely could be a little bit of change there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go on the offensive side of the ball. I think, coming into the season, there was a lot of excitement, a lot of expectation. And, I don't think, really the first half, 3/4 of the season, they didn't, other than some spurts here and there, they didn't live up to those expectations. But with that said, the last 5 weeks in particular, I mean, Rashaad Penny was just lights out. I mean, it was just incredible. So, talk about, kind of the offensive side of the ball. And then we got about 4 or 5 minutes, and then want to get your take. I mean, people talking about, will Pete be back? Will Russell be back? I don't think that's in question, but what do you think offensively? And especially, you got a guy, I think, Horse, you got to feed him. You got to get him the ball, is DK Metcalf. And I don't think they got him the ball enough, but kind of what's your take? And offensively, what should Seahawks fans expect?
Yeah, Rashaad definitely opened some eyes. And I think I think what he did at the end of the year will definitely play hugely into how they construct the team this year. That said, they've got to sign him. So, he's an unrestricted free agent now. And, he'll probably have a market out there. So they're going to have to get him signed and then kind of go from there. But, some of that might depend on how confident they are what Chris Carson can do next year, and if they think he'll be back and healthy as well. They're paying for a bit of money next year. So, it'll be interesting to see I guess, how they decide to do that with those two. What they need receiver-wise, for sure. An interesting year. I think he definitely got a lot more attention from defenses early in the year. He also suffered, I think, a pretty significant injury after week 3. And I think that was more significant than he ever let on. And he let on.
Yeah.
was some rumblings in that. And I think sort of that mid-season period when there was a lot of mystery about it. I think his injury and then the fact that Russell then got hurt. I think really, you know, just threw the whole offense off quite a bit there for a little while, and I think made it harder for him to get the ball as much as they would have liked. You know, that said, I mean, he still got 12 touchdown passes. You know, he still had a pretty good year by general standards, but it wasn't, you know, it didn't match last year. It wasn't a step even further than last year. But, you know, he's another guy to get under contract this offseason. He's got the 1 year left, and I think he's going to want a new deal before next year starts. And so more so in the spring and the summer, and bring him back and you know,
Bobby going in and out just a little bit. Quick question. Hopefully we get you. We got about a minute or two left. What do you see as far as major changes and you know, what happens? Major changes. What happens with Russell? What happens with
figuring out
Pete?
how to do that?
Sorry, I don't know if you heard that last question. I was saying, with about a minute left, any major changes you see offensively, and you know what happens with Russell, what happens with Pete? You know, the rumblings of that, they're not going anywhere. But kind of what's your take on it this last minute?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up slightly. So I didn't really hear it. Then
what's your take? Any major changes, and what happens with Russell? What happens with Pete Carroll?
Oh, nothing's going to happen with Pete. I mean, if that was going to happen, it would have already happened. You know, they wouldn't start having Pete, you know, interview defensive coordinators and try to hire that if they were then going to up with Pete. So there's no question about that. I don't think there's any question about Russell. You know, I don't think this is the year for Russell to maybe try to get out of Seattle if that's what he wants. He's got 2 years left on his contract. This isn't this isn't the time, really, the scenario when you can kind of logically maybe to get your contract redone. You know, that happens more so when you've got a year going into your final year of the deal, coming off the season that he did as well. You know, I think that. I think the decisions that were sort of made when they didn't make any decisions, essentially. After the end of the year, they're going to roll it back to the main characters the main guys on this team, Pete and John and put together a team around them and kind of go for it again next year. No rebuilding or anything like that right now. So, you know, you would logically probably only move away from Russell if you thought you were going to be building. I don't think that's going to happen now, and I don't think it's going to with Pete Carroll as coach either. Pete will step one in September. I think by the time the Seahawks decide they're going to rebuild, I think it'll be with a different coach. I don't think it'll be with Pete. And again, I don't know that you're going to logically be able to trade Russell for anybody that would be as immediately good of a quarterback for this team as Wilson. So
no doubt.
you know, you would only trade Russell if you decided you were starting.
Yep. We are out of time. That is Bob Condotta. Check him out, Seattle Times. And he is the Seahawks expert, Seahawks guru. Bob, thanks a lot for taking time out of your schedule to join us. And make sure to stay tuned. Lit Line is up next. Also, a couple of big high school games tomorrow night. Rainier Beach Friday night. We are at why am I drawing a blank? Thank you very much. We have O'Day, Seattle Prep and O'Day. So tomorrow night, Rainier Beach, Roosevelt, and then Friday night, Seattle Prep and O'Day, right here on Rainier Avenue Radio. For Daniel B, for Bob Condotta, I'm Rick DuPree. Hope you enjoyed the show. Lit Line is next. Don't go anywhere until next week. Peace and God bless.
This is